The morning room at Harbrooke House, Grosvenor Square, was not a room built for weeping. It had been arranged for presentation: pale walls, a writing table near the window, chairs set at precise angles that suggested order and compliance rather than comfort. On the 12th of October, at 10:30 in the morning, Arabella Harbrooke sat in that room in ivory silk that had been pressed and laid out for her before dawn, and she had been crying for 20 minutes without making a single sound. Her hands were folded in her lap because her mother had told her not to touch the contract until she was instructed to. The contract sat on the table before her, already signed on one side by her father, who had set down the pen and retreated to his chair by the wall as though the matter was concluded. Lord Westcombe, 52 years old, patient as stone, indifferent as weather, stood at the window and watched the square below without any particular interest in the young woman behind him. Arabella kept her eyes on the table and let the tears fall, without lifting her hand to stop them. Because stopping them would have required a movement her body no longer trusted itself to make correctly. Her mother, Viscountess Honoria Harbrooke, stood at the edge of the table with the pen extended, and her voice dropped to the registers she used when she meant to be final. "Stop crying, Arabella," the Viscountess said. "You will marry him. Women in your position do. Sign the contract." In the corridor outside, Lord Caspian Aldermere, Duke of Aldermere, 34 years old, and present at Harbrooke House on a matter of Lords' Committee business that had nothing to do with this room, had been standing 90 seconds in the hallway after the butler told him the Viscount was with family but would be out shortly. The morning room door was a quarter open. He had heard all of it: the Viscountess's voice, the silence that answered it, and the particular quality of a silence that belongs to a person who has already given up arguing. He stepped into the doorway. He did not knock. "No," Caspian said. "She won't." The Viscountess turned. The pen was still in her hand. Lord Westcombe turned from the window. The Viscount, in his chair by the wall, looked at the floor. "Your Grace," the Viscountess said, "this is a private matter." "It was, Lady Harbrooke," Caspian said. He crossed the threshold by one step and addressed the young woman at the table directly. "Miss Harbrooke, forgive the intrusion. Do you wish to sign that contract?" Arabella raised her head. It was not a question she had been asked in this room in a very long time. She had been told what would happen, and told why it was necessary, and told that her feelings on the subject were a luxury the family could not afford. She had not been asked. "No, Your Grace," she said. "I do not." "Then you will not." He looked at her father, then at Lord Westcombe. "Lord Harbrooke, your daughter has declined the match before a witness. The contract is void. Lord Westcombe, I am sorry for your time." He looked at the Viscountess last, and his voice did not change its register. "Lady Harbrooke, I will be escorting Miss Harbrooke from this house within the hour. Her possessions may be sent to my sister's address in Grosvenor Street by nightfall." He turned back to Arabella. "Miss Harbrooke, may I offer you my arm?" She rose. Her legs did not hold her well. He crossed to the table and offered his elbow, not his arm, his elbow, and waited without moving while she steadied herself against his sleeve. They walked out of the morning room together, and Caspian did not look back. And Arabella could not have said afterward whether the Viscountess spoke again, because the blood in her ears made it impossible to hear anything clearly until the front door closed behind them. The carriage was waiting. He handed her in without touching her skin and gave the coachman the address before he sat across from her. And then he did not speak for a full minute. She was shaking now, not crying, not yet, but shaking in the way that comes when the body has been braced for so long that the release of bracing is itself a kind of violence. He removed his coat, placed it over her shoulders without asking, and pulled the window shade half down against the October light. "Miss Harbrooke," he said, "you are safe. You are not promised to me. You are not obligated to me in any way. My sister, Lady Celestine, will receive you as her guest until you have decided what you wish to do. You may write to anyone you choose. You may leave tomorrow if you wish. Do you understand what I am telling you?" "Yes, Your Grace," Arabella said. "Thank you." "My name is Caspian," he said. "When you feel able to use it, please do. Not before." She said nothing for a moment. Then, very quietly, she answered him. "Yes." The carriage turned onto Park Lane, and she began to cry differently, not the silent, controlled tears of the morning room, but the kind that comes when the necessity of control has finally passed. He did not reach across the carriage toward her. He sat with his hands still on his knees and watched London move past the window. And when she had finished, he passed her his handkerchief without comment, and she held it folded in her lap for the rest of the 90-minute drive, with his coat still around her shoulders. Lady Celestine Aldermere Vane received Arabella that evening without ceremony, which was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in years. There was no formal introduction in the drawing room, no arrangement of chairs to suggest that Arabella was being assessed. Celestine simply came downstairs, looked at her, said, "You will have the room at the end of the east corridor. It has the better window," and told the housekeeper to bring supper up on a tray. She did not ask what had happened. She did not ask what Arabella needed. She assigned her a room and left her to sleep. 4 days later, a letter arrived from Viscountess Harbrooke demanding Arabella's immediate return on grounds of filial duty and the family's reputation. Celestine read it, declined in 2 sentences, sealed her reply, and dispatched it before she mentioned the letter to Arabella at all. When she did mention it, at breakfast the following morning, she said only that she had written back and that the matter was settled for the present. "What did you say to her?" Arabella asked. "I said that Miss Harbrooke is a guest in my household and will remain so at her own pleasure," Celestine said, "and that any further correspondence on the subject should be addressed to my brother's solicitor." Arabella set down her teacup. "She will not like that." "No," Celestine agreed. "She will not." She picked up her own cup and said nothing further, and Arabella understood that this was what protection looked like when it was given without performance. Within the week, the household traveled to Aldermere Court in Sussex. Caspian made a point, over the first 3 weeks, of being present at meals and absent from everything else. He was civil at dinner, answered questions when addressed, and did not seek Arabella out in any room she occupied alone. She noticed this, and she understood it. And she was grateful for it in the way that a person is grateful for a door left open rather than a door held wide. What she had not anticipated was the apologizing. It began the first morning at Aldermere. She apologized for being late to breakfast by 4 minutes, then apologized for taking the chair nearest the fire, then apologized to the housekeeper for asking where the library was rather than finding it herself. By the end of the first fortnight, she had apologized 17 times for things she had not done. On the 17th occasion, she had apologized for asking Celestine a question about the household accounts, as though the question itself were an imposition. Caspian looked up from his newspaper and said, without particular inflection, "Miss Harbrooke, you will exhaust yourself. Save your apologies for things you have actually done." She looked at him. He had already returned to his newspaper. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. entirely involuntary, and pressed her hand briefly over her mouth. Celestine continued eating. Caspian turned a page. He had heard it, she was certain of it. But he remarked on nothing, and she was grateful for that too. By the third week at Aldermere, Arabella was sleeping through the night. She had not slept through the night in 2 years at Harbrooke House, where the walls were thin and her mother's displeasure had a way of arriving through closed doors. At Aldermere, the walls were old stone, and the house was quiet after 10, and she woke each morning to birdsong and a fire already laid. And the particular luxury of this was something she did not yet know how to hold without feeling that it would be taken. She joined Celestine in managing the household accounts in the 4th week, because she had noticed the ledgers on the morning room desk and asked whether help would be welcome. Celestine said yes, and meant it. And within 3 days, it was clear that Arabella had been doing this kind of work since she was 16. Not as a guest assisting, but as someone who understood figures, who caught an error in the quarterly coal receipts on her second morning and corrected it without being asked. It was Caspian who invited her to the estate ledgers in week 5, crossing to the doorway of the library one afternoon and saying, without preamble, "I have the Eastfield drainage accounts open, if you would like to look at them. They are giving me difficulty." She followed him in. They sat at the same desk, the large writing table in the center of the library, with the ledgers spread between them, and their forearms were perhaps 3 inches apart on the leather surface. He worked through the Eastfield columns, and she worked through the drainage expenditures, and neither spoke much, only occasionally pointing to a figure or sliding a page across. After perhaps an hour, he reached for the bound ledger to her left, and their fingers met on the leather binding. She felt the contact, the warmth of his hand through the cool of the book, and did not withdraw. And he did not withdraw. And for 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then he released the ledger, and she turned the page without speaking, and the afternoon continued. She wrote to Persephone twice in the first fortnight. The replies came back in a week, then 10 days, and something in them was wrong in a way Arabella could not yet name. The handwriting was Persephone's. The sentences were Persephone's. But the tone was constrained in a way her sister's letters had never been. Careful, as though each sentence had been read before it was sealed. Arabella read the second letter 3 times and put it away, without being able to identify precisely what it was that made her uneasy. A second letter from the Viscountess arrived in the 6th week. This one addressed to Caspian directly. Celestine intercepted it, brought it to Arabella in the sitting room, and read it aloud without editorial comment. The Viscountess had written that Arabella's removal from Harbrooke House had been conducted without legal authority, that her daughter's continued residence at Aldermere Court was an embarrassment to both families, and that she expected the matter to be resolved before Christmas. Celestine folded the letter when she finished reading. "Would you like to respond?" Arabella was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. Celestine set the letter on the table between them. She did not ask why, and she did not press, and she did not suggest that a response might be prudent or politic. She simply accepted the word and moved on to the household matters she had come to discuss. And Arabella sat with the knowledge that she had made a decision, a real one, with consequences she had considered, and had not apologized for it. It was the first decision she had made in this house, without a sorry attached to the end of it. And she noticed the absence of the word the way you notice, when a sound you have grown accustomed to finally stops. The morning post arrived at Aldermere Court each day with the first post. And on a Tuesday in the 8th week, Arabella opened it over breakfast, while Celestine reviewed correspondence, and the two younger girls, Celestine's daughters, 9 and 11, argued quietly over the last of the marmalade. Arabella turned to the second page and found the third column and read, in the clear print of the social announcements, Lord Westcombe of Kent is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Persephone Harbrooke of Grosvenor Square. Nuptials to take place in May. She read it twice. She set the paper down with her hand, flat on top of it. She finished her tea. She said nothing for the remainder of breakfast. When the meal was over, she went upstairs to her rooms and did not come down until evening. When she came down, Caspian was in the library by the fire, reading. He looked up when she came in, and he read her face, and he set his book down without being asked. My sister is to marry Lord Westcombe in May, Arabella said. I read it in the paper this morning. My mother did not write to warn me. She announced it publicly, so I could not refuse it privately. Persephone is 19. She has not had a season. She has no voice of her own in that house, and she has no one there to refuse for her. Sit down, Caspian said. Who is your solicitor? I do not have one, Arabella said. She sat because her legs were doing the unreliable thing again. I have no money. I cannot engage one. I will engage Mr. Nettleship of Lincoln's Inn tomorrow morning, Caspian said. In your name. I will pay the initial inquiry. If there is anything to pursue, you will retain him in your own name from whatever the inquiry uncovers. If there is nothing to find, I will pay the bill, and we will not speak of it again. You will not owe me anything. Why? Arabella said. She looked at him directly. Why, Caspian? He was quiet for a long moment. He rose and went to his desk at the far end of the library, opened a drawer, and returned with a single folded sheet. He held it out. This is a letter from my sister Cordelia, he said. It arrived a fortnight ago. It is the 7th letter I have had from her in 7 years. Read it. She unfolded it. 4 lines about the weather in Yorkshire, a mild October, the moors quite brown. 1 line about a kitchen garden she had planted in the spring. A closing that said she hoped he was well and remained his affectionate sister. Nothing else. No request. No complaint. No question. Nothing that could be called a communication from a living person to a person she loved. She was forced at 22 to a man who has not beaten her and has not loved her, Caspian said. I watched it happen. I was 27. I protested privately. I did not refuse publicly, because I did not yet know how to refuse publicly in a way that could not be overruled. She has lived 7 years in that house in Yorkshire. She writes me a letter once a year that tells me she is alive and nothing else. He stopped. Then, I did not stop it, Arabella. I will not fail that test twice. Do not thank me. This is not for you. Will you let me do it? Arabella folded the letter carefully along its original creases and returned it to him. Yes, she said. On one condition. You will not attend any meeting with Mr. Nettleship. You will not read any correspondence that passes between us. This is mine. Agreed, he said. Good, she replied. He went to bed at 11. She stayed in the library, at the writing table, and composed her first letter to Mr. Nettleship of Lincoln's Inn in her own hand. Clear, specific, and without a single apology. She posted it herself at dawn, walking down the Aldermere lane in the October cold with her cloak over her nightgown and her boots unlaced. And she stood at the post box for a moment after the letter had gone through it, her breath making a small cloud in the morning air, before she turned and walked back to the house. Mr. Holcroft arrived at Aldermere Court on a Wednesday afternoon without announcement. He was 71 years old, a solicitor of the old school. And he had been growing uneasy for several months about a pattern in certain interest receipts that had not resolved itself to his satisfaction. He asked the footman who admitted him whether he might speak with Miss Harbrooke. And he was shown to the library, and Arabella came down in 10 minutes and found him standing by the window with his case held in both hands, and his expression that of a man who has been rehearsing something difficult. "Miss Harbrooke," he said, "my name is Holcroft. I was solicitor to your grandmother, the late Lady Cordelia Harbrooke, for 26 years. I should like to speak with you before I show you anything, if I may." "Please sit down, Mr. Holcroft," Arabella said. She sat across the table from him. He sat. He set his case on the table but did not open it. "Your grandmother," he said, "left you £8,000 in your own name, to be held in trust until your 21st birthday. That was 6 years ago. I have written to you 12 times in those 6 years. The last letter I sent arrived in November, and the reply I received, as with the 11 before it, is not in your hand." Arabella looked at him. She did not speak. "I have been in the law for 48 years, Mr. Holcroft said. "I know a person's hand. I know the weight of a pen, the particular way a woman educated at home presses the downstroke. The 12 responses I received are consistent with each other and inconsistent with the 2 genuine letters I have from you. One written at 16, one at 17, when your grandmother was still alive, and you wrote to her directly and she shared them with me. The forgeries are competent. They are not yours." Arabella said, "Show me." He opened his case. He laid the documents on the table in order. As a man lays out evidence he has arranged many times in his mind before he arranged it in fact. The 12 letters he had sent, in date order. The 12 forged responses. Her grandmother's original deed of trust, with her name on it in her grandmother's hand and the sum written out in full. A 6-year accounting of diverted income, annotated in Mr. Holcroft's careful script, the quarterly disbursements redirected, the destination of each sum, the total accumulated across 6 years, applied to the costs of Viscount Harbrooke's campaigns for his seat in the Lords. Arabella read each document. She did not rush. When she came to the accounting, she read every line. And when she set the last page down, she sat without moving for a moment, her hands flat on the table, looking at the far wall of the library. "Mr. Holcroft," she said at last, "will you leave the originals with me and return tomorrow morning?" "I will," he said. He rose. "Miss Harbrooke, I am sorry it took me this long to come in person." "You are here now," Arabella said. "That is what matters." He left. She sat with the documents for 2 hours before she moved, and then she went to find Nettleship's address and wrote him a letter that was 3 pages long and contained every figure and every date. And she did not go to bed until it was finished. Over the 6 weeks that followed, Arabella worked. She worked the way she had worked at 16 on her father's estate accounts, methodically, without complaint, without asking anyone to tell her what to do next. Nettleship corresponded with her 3 times a week, and she with him, and she drafted the deed of restoration in her own hand at his direction and corrected the language twice when she found it imprecise. The deed required the Viscountess to return the capital, £8,000, and 6 years of diverted income, calculated to the quarter. The second document transferred Persephone's guardianship to Arabella and Lady Celestine Aldermere Vane. Arabella corrected the language on that one 3 times. In month 4, Lady Celestine announced at dinner that she intended them all to attend the country assembly the following Thursday, and that she would not be argued with. Caspian said nothing. Arabella said she did not have anything suitable to wear, and Celestine said she was approximately Celestine's size, and that was settled. They went. The assembly hall in the village was warm and crowded and smelled of candle wax and pine boughs. And Arabella stood beside Celestine and watched the dancing for half an hour before Caspian appeared at her elbow and said without any particular expression, "There is a quadrille forming. Will you dance?" They danced once. A quadrille with gloved hands and formal figures. And across the room, 100 people talked and moved and paid them no particular attention. The figure required 3 exchanges of grip across the pattern, and at the first 2, Caspian's hand was exactly where the pattern required it to be. And at the third, his gloved fingers closed on hers a beat longer than the figure demanded. She felt it. She looked up. He was already looking at her, not at the next step of the dance, not at the room, at her. And 3 heartbeats passed before the figure released them to their separate lines. Neither of them spoke of it for the rest of the evening. In month 5, Arabella asked Celestine whether her grandmother's portrait, banished to the Aldermere attic 20 years earlier after the late Countess's death, when the Viscountess had decided it was taking up space in the Harbrooke House drawing room, might be brought down, cleaned, and hung somewhere it could be seen. Celestine arranged it the following week, without fanfare, put it between the 2 long windows of the gallery, and said nothing further. The Viscountess, in the same month, engaged a London solicitor to file a petition challenging Arabella's removal from Harbrooke House on grounds of mental unsoundness. The petition required a supporting statement from a physician, Dr. Farrow, who had attended the Harbrooke family for 19 years, declined to provide one in writing. Without explanation, the petition was never filed. The night before Arabella was to travel to London, she could not sleep. She came downstairs at 2 in the morning and found the library lit. Caspian at his desk with papers, a habit she had learned not to question. And she crossed the room to him without speaking and rested her forehead against his shoulder. Not an embrace, 3 seconds of wait, no more. He placed one hand flat against the back of her head, his palm warm against her unpinned hair, and said, "You will not fail tomorrow, Arabella. And if something goes differently than you have planned, it will not be failure. It will only be a different road." She pulled back. She nodded once. She went to bed. And this time she slept. Late April. 6 months to the day since Caspian had stood in the doorway of the morning room at Harbrooke House and spoken one sentence that changed the course of everything. Arabella arrived at Harbrooke House alone in a hired carriage, with Mr. Holcroft and Mr. Nettleship waiting in the hall on her instruction. She had told Caspian he was not to come. She had told him this on the night she posted Nettleship her first letter, and she had not revisited it. If she walked into that morning room with the Duke of Aldermere behind her, her mother would look at him and not at her, and the work of 6 months would be his, and she would have traded one dependency for another. He was at Celestine's house on Grosvenor Street, 4 streets away, because that was her condition, and he had accepted it without argument. The butler admitted her and did not meet her eye. She knew this house, every step of it, every creak in the 3rd stair, the way the morning room door caught on its frame in damp weather. She walked to the morning room without being shown. The Viscountess was sitting with her embroidery. She did not rise. "Arabella," she said, "you have come to apologize." "No, Mama," Arabella said. "I have come to speak with you once. When I am finished, I will leave, and you will not see me again unless you ask." She set the folio on the table, the same table the contract had sat on in October, in the same spot, the morning light falling across it from the same window. She opened it. She placed the documents in order, Mr. Holcroft's 12 letters, the 12 forged responses, her grandmother's original deed of trust, the 6-year accounting of diverted income, the deed of restoration, the transfer of guardianship. Grandmama left me £8,000 in my own name at 21, Arabella said. Mr. Holcroft wrote to me 12 times. You answered in my hand. You used the income to fund Papa's campaigns for the Lords. She paused. I am 23, Mama. The fraud is 6 years old. If you sign the deed on the table, you return the capital and the income. If you do not sign, Mr. Holcroft and Mr. Nettleship are in your hall, and they will file in Chancery before the week is out, and your husband will not sit in the Lords in this life or the next. The Viscountess set down her embroidery. She did not look at the papers. You would ruin your father, she said. Papa made his own choices when he stopped reading my letters 6 years ago. Arabella said, I am not ruining him. I am declining to fund him any further. Silence. The Viscountess looked at the window. Persephone marries Westcombe in 3 weeks, she said. That is decided. Persephone is not marrying Westcombe, Arabella said. You will sign the transfer of her guardianship to me and Lady Celestine Aldermere Vane. That document is also on the table. On what authority, Arabella? On the authority of the £8,000 you forged my name to take, Arabella said. I have been patient for 6 years without knowing I was being patient. I am finished. Sign or do not sign. I will wait 10 minutes. She crossed to the window. She did not sit. She did not watch her mother. She looked out at the square below, the same square Lord Westcombe had looked down at in October while she sat at the table behind him, folding her hands in her lap because she had been told not to touch the contract. She watched a woman cross the square with a child beside her, both of them moving quickly in the April cold. And she kept her breathing even, and her hands still. Behind her, after a silence that was long enough to be its own kind of answer, she heard the pen being taken up. The scratch of the nib on paper, careful, deliberate. The soft sound of sand poured from the shaker. The press and twist of the seal. One document sealed, then a second. The Viscountess spoke very quietly. Tell me one thing, Arabella. Did your grandmother know what she was doing when she left the money to you and not to me? Arabella turned. I think she knew exactly what she was doing, Mama, she said. I think she understood you better than I did. Yes, the Viscountess said. I expect she did. She set the pen down. She rang for the butler. She did not look at her daughter again. Tell Mr. Holcroft he may collect the signed deeds, she said to the butler when he appeared. Tell my younger daughter she may pack her things. I will not see either of them before they leave the house. She paused. That will be all. Arabella walked to the door. At the threshold, she stopped. Mama, she said, I am not closing this door. I am not holding it open either. If you wish to write to me in a year, you may. I will not, the Viscountess said. I know, Arabella said. I am telling you anyway. She left. In the hall, Mr. Holcroft collected the deeds from the butler and tucked them into his case with the deliberateness of a man who has waited 6 years to close something. Mr. Nettleship went upstairs. Arabella went to the front step and stood in the April air with Persephone's cloak over her arm. She had brought it from Aldermere Court, folded in her traveling bag, because she had not been going to let her sister walk out of this house, in their mother's. Persephone came down with one small trunk and the maid carrying a hat box. She saw Arabella on the step, and she did not run, and she did not weep. She walked down the 3 front steps steadily and took Arabella's hand. Bella, she said. Arabella drew her close. "Come, Seth," she said. She put the cloak around her sister's shoulders. "The carriage is waiting." They walked out of Harbrooke House together. The door closed behind them. Neither of them looked back. The carriage arrived at Grosvenor Street at 1:30. Caspian opened the door himself before the footman reached it. He looked at Arabella's face, at the steadiness of it, the particular quality of a person who has done a hard thing and come through the other side of it intact. And he nodded once and stepped back to let them in. He did not ask how it went. He did not need to. Persephone was settled into Celestine's household that afternoon, given the room beside Arabella's. And Celestine showed her around the house herself with the same practical, undemonstrative kindness she had shown Arabella 6 months earlier. The Viscount, facing a fraud he could not contest publicly without exposing the full scope of it, withdrew from his lord's bid within the week and removed himself to the country estate, where he remained. The Viscountess refused all correspondence. Arabella wrote to her once, a single sheet. "Mama, I will not close the door. I will not hold it open either. A." No reply came. She had not expected one. June came warm to Sussex. Aldermere Court in June was a different house from the October one. The gardens open, the windows thrown wide, the long gallery full of afternoon light. It was in the long gallery that Arabella found Caspian one afternoon, standing before the portrait that had been hung between the 2 windows in month 5. He had been there, she suspected, for some time. He was looking at it with the particular stillness of a man who has been thinking rather than simply looking. "Caspian?" she said. He turned. "Your grandmother?" he said. "Yes," she answered. "She looks like you." "I have been told," Arabella said. She sat on the gallery bench. After a moment he sat beside her, and neither of them spoke for perhaps a full minute. The light came through the windows on both sides of the portrait, and the old woman in it looked back at them with an expression that was composed and not unkind. "I want to ask you something," Arabella said. "And I have decided there is no elegant way to do it." "Then try the inelegant way," Caspian said. "I would like you to marry me," Arabella said. "I am asking now because I want it to be clear. I have my own money. My sister is safe. My name is my own. I am not asking you because I have nowhere else to go or because I owe you something. I am asking because I want to, and because I have wanted to for some time. Because I am tired of waiting for an elegant moment that is apparently not coming." She paused. "If you do not want to, I will stay in Sussex as your neighbor. Because I like this county and I like your sister very much, and I would not leave for a refusal." He laughed. It was the first full laugh she had heard from him. Not the dry, contained sound of amusement, but a real one, warm and unguarded. And it lasted long enough that she felt her own face change in response. "Arabella," he said. "Yes. Please, yes." "That was efficient," she said. "I have had 6 months to prepare the answer." She leaned against his shoulder. He put his arm around her slowly, without hurrying the movement, and she did not withdraw. Above them, her grandmother watched. After a moment he turned and kissed her forehead, and then he waited, and she tilted her face up, and he kissed her properly, mouth to mouth, unhurried, one hand at her jaw and one at her shoulder. And her hand came up to his chest, and when they parted she was smiling in a way that surprised her by its completeness. "Caspian," she said, "that was the first time I have kissed anyone." "I thought it might be," he said. "Was it adequate?" "It was very good," he said. "Try again." She did. Longer this time, and when they parted she stayed close, her forehead near his jaw, and above them the woman in the portrait looked down at the two of them on the gallery bench with an expression that had not changed in 20 years of waiting to be found. August. Aldermere Court Chapel, small and old and smelling of stone, and the flowers Persephone had cut from the kitchen garden the day before. 15 guests. Celestine's 2 daughters in the second pew, the younger one already whispering to the elder. Persephone in the front pew beside Celestine, in the blue dress she had brought from Harbrooke House, in her single small trunk, sitting with her hands folded and her eyes bright. The vicar was a mild man who had married 3 generations of Aldermeres and knew when to speak and when to be still. He spoke the service with the unhurried care of someone who understood that the words mattered, and when he reached the passage that required it, if any person can show just cause why these 2 may not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or hereafter hold their peace. He paused, as he always paused, and the chapel was quiet. No one spoke. No one needed to. Arabella stood at the altar in the October ivory silk that had been pressed and altered and made new again. And in the beat of silence, after the vicar's question, she thought of a morning room and a pen held toward her and a voice telling her to stop crying and sign. She thought of a door a quarter open and a man stepping into the frame of it. She thought of a carriage and a coat placed over her shoulders and a name offered carefully, not before she was ready for it. Then she said clearly, without a tremor, "I will." The vicar smiled and continued, and beside her, Caspian's hand was warm around hers. And in the front pew, Persephone pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling for a moment before she composed herself. And the August light came through the chapel's east window and fell across the stone floor in a long, unhurried line, and the ceremony continued to its end.